Who says a trilogy can't be better than the sequel? In this case, with the DeSales Stallions taking on the Hartley Hawks for the third time, I think you might just change your mind. If this Friday brings anything close to the results we have seen in rounds 1 and 2 between these two teams, it's sure to be a wild ride. DeSales comes into this matchup having won the first few meetings between the schools with scores of 21-24 and 16-14. DeSales has gotten it done, but it certainly has been far from easy. Both DeSales and Hartley come into this game with potent running attacks with players like Quintel Quinn for DeSales, who last week against Jonathan Alder ran for 179 yards and racked up 3 scores. As for Hartley, I'm looking at players like Marcellus Parker, who pulled the weight of their matchup last week against Sheridan for 153 yards and their lone TD. Both teams are fairly run-heavy, but these teams are not afraid to throw the ball. Hartley comes into this game with QB Peyton Underwood, who even though is known to only attempt 10 or fewer passes, can still sling the ball downfield, catching defenses off guard. For DeSales, they have 2 options, senior Whit Hobgood and returning Nicky Pantello, who has some experience playing in round 1 of this trilogy. DeSales has scored at least 30 points in their last 2 games, so they will be looking to score early and often. For Hartley, their game last week could be key to how to win this matchup. Against Sheridan, they held the ball for the last 8 minutes, controlling the clock effectively, keeping Sheridan off the field, which is something they should definitely strive to do against an on-fire DeSales offense. No matter what, though, I feel this game is bound to be a certainly exciting one to watch from start to finish. I'm Travis Snapper for Score on Air. Back to Kyra and the guys in the studio.
All right, thank you, Travis, for that preview. Okay, guys, let's move on to Bishop Hartley versus St. Francis DeSales. Okay, this is a huge game, and the fact that these two have already played each other twice in the regular season is just crazy. So I think this should add to the drama, here with them playing each other.
Oh, yeah.
Do you want to go first? Go ahead.
Man, I was at the first game, Hartley and DeSales, and Hartley got off to a great start. But of course, it was a back and forth game throughout the entire match, and St. Francis DeSales pulled out a win, just barely pulled out a win. And then looking back at the highlights that I saw of the second matchup, both these games have been really close. A 5-point margin splits the teams by maybe a field goal, and somebody gets a safety. This matchup, we call it the trilogy, and you guys will see something special tomorrow night that I'm making. It's honestly going to be one for the ages. All eyes are going to be on this matchup right here. Why? We were talking about it just now. Quintel Quinn, Jonathan Thompson, 2 star running backs for St. Francis DeSales, and you have Peyton Underwood, Marcellus Parker on the other side of the ball for Bishop Hartley. I think both offenses are going to have one heck of a night tomorrow night. I don't see it being a high-scoring game, but I don't see it being a low-scoring game either. And Jonathan Thompson actually, he's 300 yards away from breaking the school record for career rushing yards. So that might be something that fuels the Hartley defense to stop, because obviously you don't want that to happen. But on the other side, Marcellus Parker last week rushed 36 times for 156 yards and a touchdown. And the Hartley offense has 2 scoring drives of at least 13 plays in the first half and a 17-play drive in the third quarter. So, again, Hartley's offense, Peyton Underwood, Marcellus Parker, maybe we might see Sumo Kesley get a couple touches of the ball. I think Hartley actually makes the upset tomorrow night.
Anthony?
I've been beating the drum all year talking about DeSales, Hartley, and Bishop Watterson, and them all playing again. Sheridan kind of spoiled that, but we knew they were going to play again. Mm-hmm. We knew it was going to be one of them. And the thing about Hartley this year, they're young. They're very young. And so to me, they're not the same team they were the last time they played DeSales. So I think they're a lot better right now. Yeah. With that being said, DeSales is playing very, very good right now.
Yeah.
The way they played against Alder is impressive. Their offense and defense, their defense was scoring points against Granville. So they're playing really well. The thing to keep an eye on with Hartley, the last time they played, I believe Marcellus Parker didn't get the ball till early in the second half. And I don't know why, if it was by scheme. And sometimes I've been on the sideline coaching, I've been in the booth coaching, calling plays. You don't purposely do things, but the game happens. Things happen, the flow of the game, and you kind of forget something. The second half, they got to getting him the ball. And then at that point, I felt like Hartley was playing better. They're playing more of who they were. If you watched the game last week, they just wore Sheridan down. The score was close, but I don't think Hartley punted the entire night. It was just a matter of just wearing them down with Parker. And Sumo Kessler, you mentioned him. He's getting healthy. He's starting to carry the ball a lot more. The only touchdown the Hawks gave up was literally Kessler fumbled one time and gave him the ball around the 20, 30-yard line, so it was short field. If I go out on a limb and say Hartley, I'm probably going to get called a homer. So I'll say this. Anytime you have Quintel Quinn and anytime you have Jonathan Thompson, I think you got the two best players on the field at that point. I'm going to go with DeSales. I think they're the better football team, but I'm telling you what, the Hawks are playing the best football of the year, and I think they definitely have a chance at the upset.
You mentioned being called a homer. Obviously, your son plays on the line. That line has been looking stellar so far. As I wasn't at the last match, but I've heard wonderful things about, especially your son and just a whole line in general. How much of a factor do you think they're going to play in this matchup?
That offensive line's everything, and they're actually down a couple guys. And the first time they played DeSales, it was their first week after losing Crenshaw on the offensive line, who's a big player for the Hawks. So literally for them, it was kind of, honestly, a perfect storm, that DeSales game. I felt like they were almost ready to get that W against DeSales, but now these guys got their feet under them. The offensive line is a really tight-knit group. They even worked out in the offseason when, COVID was going on and you couldn't have organized workouts. The senior linemen were getting people together, guys like Thivner. They were getting on the phone. The guys were going and running and working out and working on things. So the offensive line is what makes everything work at Hartley. And you look at them, they're all different shapes and sizes. You might have a guy that's 5'10", 160. You might have a guy that's 6'3", 295. But the thing is, they all have heart. You all have to play hard if you play for Hartley's line. So it could come down to the trenches. And DeSales is no slouch on the line either.
Yeah. Really quick, you mentioned the offensive line, different varieties. Quarterback protection, obviously, is a key factor in this. You have Peyton Underwood thrown for 8 touchdowns, but averages fewer than 10 passing attempts per game. Do you see Peyton throwing the ball more, or do you think he's going to rely on the offense to block and use the running game?
Well, let's be clear. 10 passes at Hartley is a lot. That's airing it out. So let's be clear on that, because there's been years past where they might throw 2 or 3 times a game. So let's be clear on that. But with Peyton, I think it's just going to depend on how the coaches feel the game. And these coaches have played in multiple state championships, multiple regional finals. Matter of fact, I think they played in 8 out of 10 or 9 out of 10 regional finals the last 10 years. So they know they're going to get the flow of the game, see what happens. They're not going to give him too much. He is a sophomore. I think that's kind of what last week's game plan was, playing a senior-laden team. Let's run the ball. Let's pound him. So I think he'll definitely have protection. They use play action. They'll roll him a little bit to keep things easy for him. But they'll take some shots with him. But I think it's just going to depend on how the game goes. Honestly, I personally think it's going to be a heavy dose of Parker, and if he gets it going, then you can play action off of that. But I think they're going to run the ball a lot. You might see 10 throws again, but they'll be meaningful throws. 2 or 3 of them could go for touchdowns.
I see it also on the other side of the ball. You have 2 quarterbacks that DeSales goes with, Nicky Pintello and Whit Hobgood. Whit Hobgood obviously being the senior. I think maybe they go with him more, but I was, again, looking back on that first match, Nicky Pintello was really good in that first match. So I want to say maybe bounce back and forth with the DeSales quarterback option.
Yeah, Hobgood is the one that kind of, he's been playing more recently than Pintello. Hobgood's more of a thrower. Pintello's more of a guy with his legs. And honestly, if you asked Hartley, I bet you they'd rather see Hobgood than Pintello. Those guys with legs, man, when they can extend plays, it's kind of tough to defend them.
That's fair.
All right, guys. So you guys are both going with Hartley here?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm going to DeSales.
DeSales, Hartley.
Yep.
Hopefully I can get into my house tonight.